I have some exciting news. The Fertile Hive is a buzzing community designed for women interested in boosting their natural fertility through restored health. The infertility journey requires a guide whose knowledge and expertise can cut through the noise and provide clarity. Dr. Christina Packus and Naomi Davis, physician assistant, provide this guidance through education for members to confidently choose their path to healing. The Fertile Hive is the only membership community. It's a truly safe place where women with infertility can thrive. We are launching this membership community with a contest. The top 20 contestants win a free membership for the year. Each submission includes a short video clip answering a few simple questions. Submit your entry by January 16th, 2026 at thefertilehive.com. Again, that's thefertilehive.com, and look for the Queen Bee. I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. We are going to be talking about postpartum hormones and a lot more in regards to postpartum as well. But have you ever thought to yourself, like what happens with our hormones postpartum? I know as a nurse practitioner in my office, a lot of times patients will come in postpartum and they'll say something like, I want to get my hormones checked because I think something is off with my hormones. And so in thinking about that question, I think, wow, that's interesting because I realize that most women actually don't know what occurs to their hormones postpartum. And so I think this is a question that all of us have kind of wondered. And I think you're going to be really happy to know the answers because it's going to allow you to have strategies also to have a better postpartum period. And also it's going to allow you to know when is it important to see my healthcare professional regarding the symptoms I have, or do I just kind of wait it out and wait for my body in a sense to restore naturally? Jamie is passionate about this topic as well. And I know she recently did actually a whole webinar or presentation on maternal postpartum hormones. So I'm going to let Jamie kind of start us off with really that experience and what she learned in doing the research. And we'll just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it. Teresa, I think the reason this topic matters so much to me is not only because I personally struggled after my first baby with postpartum depression, but also because, again, like you're saying, so little is known and talked about. We basically just build up to this delivery of a baby, and then everything becomes about the baby and the baby's health, which is good because the baby is vulnerable. Without the mother, without a parent, the baby would not survive. So it's about survival, right? So anytime it's about survival, we prioritize survival. The baby needs to survive, get enough milk, get enough rest, sleep, have someone to change the diapers, have someone to love, that whole thing. But with the mother often isn't really viewed at all necessarily, especially from the aspect of health. We know to be aware of mental health, but so much of even nutrient depletion, or maybe now there's a thyroid struggle, it all affects how we feel postpartum, not to mention hormonally and all the hormones that were building up in our pregnancy now we don't have like we did in pregnancy. So some women just feel it more. There may be some of you women who are listening to this episode where you had your baby and you feel great and you're a little tired, but things are good. And there are other women who are listening to this podcast episode who may be in the throes of this kind of darkness, Teresa, and almost this shame because we just had a baby, and that is a joyful thing. But what shame we feel when we don't feel bonded to that baby. We're not necessarily happy that the baby is here with us. Our whole life has changed. We don't feel good. We know that we should feel happy. And no matter how much we will ourselves to be happy, it just isn't feeling innately like we're bonding, or it just feels like there's something wrong. So that is why I'm so passionate about this. And what's interesting is it just always seems like every year there's a wave of a type of woman who seeks help from me or from our hormone coaches. And it really does feel like lately, the last 6 months to 12 months, Teresa, is the postpartum woman. The postpartum woman, she is desperate. And we need to do better for the postpartum woman. So again, I'm excited to dig into this a little bit with you, Teresa.
Yeah. So, maybe Jamie, we can start with,
Yeah.
we have to almost like reference what happens in pregnancy in order to understand what happens postpartum, right? So
Mhm.
we just look at the science around pregnancy. What do we understand? Well, when we're pregnant, we have a huge increase in really our sex hormones. Estrogen and progesterone is the main ones that we would discuss. And progesterone, we know, is the main hormone that supports pregnancy. It literally is like the progestational hormone. And it goes so high, Jamie, so high. But estrogen does too. And this is going to help us understand why there's such a dramatic shift postpartum.
Mhm.
And, basically, and this, Jamie, and I know it, that placenta is this incredible like organ that like basically has its own life in a sense. It's so crazy and not a pretty thing either.
Mm-mm.
Like if you've ever seen a placenta, you might say to yourself, that looks like it should and maybe go in a horror movie. It is
Yeah.
not good. But it has such a huge job and it's
Mhm.
creating all of these hormones. But when that placenta is delivered postpartum, the shift is not just subtle, right? It is so dramatic. It is like going from massive amounts of hormones to none, right?
Mhm.
And that is important. And there's a very physiological reason for that. And that's because in order to now kind of like you could say, instead of housing your little newborn in your womb and keeping it safe there, the body has to go into this transition of now I feed this child. Now I bond with that child. And from a hormonal standpoint, there's a very important shift that must occur for that to happen. And that is that estrogen and progesterone have to drop, particularly estrogen, in order for prolactin, the milk producing hormone, in order to really start the milk production in a sense,
Mhm.
and also oxytocin. So we go from, again, dominance in estrogen and progesterone to two other hormones becoming dominant, prolactin and oxytocin, and
Mhm.
those just are very important. So Jamie, I'll let you kind of take it from there on what you know about that shift.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I really do think this would be an interesting study, and maybe there has been a study done with this, but women who are sensitive to hormonal fluctuations in their childbearing years of cycling, they're not pregnant, but just as they're cycling, some women are just more sensitive to hormone ups and downs, right? So maybe my migraine flares when my estrogen drops, right after ovulation, for instance. So some of these hormonal fluctuations women are more sensitive to. And I have a feeling that's probably the case even for postpartum. Some women are just more sensitive to these hormone fluctuations, which explains why some other women maybe just not struggle as bad. So, yes, after delivery, estrogen and progesterone plummet. Again, these hormones were produced by the placenta, especially after the first trimester. The placenta takes over in pregnancy. But okay, they drop sharply within hours. So, like you said, there was a massive amount of hormones, and now it just goes from everything to nothing. And just to give you an example, we talk about this in the podcast, but progesterone supports calmness, right? So, often in pregnancy, and I know this was true of myself, when I was pregnant, besides the physical discomfort, I slept like a baby. Like I was pretty calm. Like I was a happy pregnant woman, especially that first pregnancy. I thought I've lucked out. Like this pregnancy is easier than most people explain with their pregnancies. This is going to be a piece of cake postpartum. But that was not the case for me because progesterone works with GABA in the brain. And when we don't have that progesterone and there's a huge shift, there can be a rapid decline that triggers mood swings, insomnia, depression, all of these things that we hear about. So it's important, essential, and vital for all medical doctors, OBGYNs, to support the mother postpartum to assess what their progesterone levels are. And Teresa, I have a question for you. After delivery of progesterone, obviously progesterone's low. So if they're checking progesterone, there's not going to be much, if any. But as a medical professional, you support postpartum women with progesterone. So what's your rule of thinking, okay, the woman's postpartum, when when do we think about giving progesterone to this woman? What kinds of symptoms must she exhibit? Can it just be a request? Do there need to be, again, these symptoms? So I'm going to punt it back to you. Like after a woman has her baby, at what point do you suggest progesterone?
It's a great question. And first, I'll just say, I mean, 1 in 7 women have postpartum depression. So it's not a small number. And I feel like there is more awareness around this. So I think that's a good thing. And I think because there's more awareness, my threshold for treatment has also grown. Because, I mean, why do we have to treat this super severe only? Right. That my other thing is like, why does it have to be like, you have to be like literally almost hospitalized, for your depression in order for me to treat you? You don't. I mean, like, I just think, why don't we do everything we can, like you said, to support the postpartum woman? And Jamie, as you were talking about just like that drop in the neurotransmitter changes in the brain, it makes sense evolutionary wise, right? Because like when we think about, again, this evolutionary, like you have to be able to take care of this child and keep it alive, you would have to become neurotic, right? There is this like aspect of women that we have this ability to become neurotic in a way that actually is meant to like help us survive. But there's a balance between that neuroticism and healthy like relationship, right? And everything. So my threshold has changed. Now, what would be serious if you can't sleep at all, if you have anxiety throughout the day all the time, if you're crying all the time for no apparent reason, if you have intrusive thoughts, and intrusive thoughts are just thoughts that like seem to invade your brain in a way that's unhealthy and maybe either weird or scary. If you obviously have anything that has to do with harming yourself or harming anybody else, particular baby, I mean, these are the most serious ones. But let's just say you just feel a little anxious, or you just feel like, again, you're not getting great sleep, or you're so tired, or you feel overwhelmed or hopeless to some degree at times. Maybe your appetite is not great, and you need to be eating and hydrating, but you just don't feel like it. You might feel kind of wired and tired.
Yeah.
These are all symptoms of postpartum period, again, that have to do with that change in hormones and also the cortisol levels. Cortisol is that survival hormone. It also increases in pregnancy 3 to 4 times what our natural baseline is. And then it has to recalibrate postpartum. And of course, the problem is that if we don't kind of settle into a good routine postpartum, we end up having cortisol that stays elevated, which may account for why we can't lose weight right away, or we do feel wired and anxious because there is more fight or flight hormone still going on. And that's where we really have to kind of target that. But why is progesterone then helpful? Because progesterone actually calms cortisol pathways. So it's actually a super amazing, what we would call an adaptogen, really. It helps with that process of calming the body down out of that flight or fight. So, I mean, honestly, would I treat just anybody who just says, I just don't feel my best self, no matter what their symptoms are, and I want to support their recovery postpartum? Now, severe postpartum depression, we always want to encourage the use of intramuscular progesterone, which is given as an injection. Again, this is all natural progesterone, not synthetic progesterone. But maybe I have a patient who doesn't have like severe postpartum depression, but she just, again, not feeling great. And I might just use oral progesterone to help her sleep, or again, to balance those circadian rhythms. So I just think there's a wide kind of range of kind of, where I would kind of fit my retreatment options. And of course, progesterone wouldn't be the only thing, but it helps so much, Jamie. And I know you know that from personal experience. Totally. I know that from personal experience. And I have had women that like had their babies with me and have subsequent babies with me. And because they knew progesterone was so helpful the first time around, do you know what they do? 3 days postpartum. They're like, Teresa, I don't want to even take a chance that I'm not going to feel great. So then they're calling and they're like, can I just take it? And honestly, sure. Like, I don't, what harm does progesterone do? None. It absolutely does no harm. It does not decrease milk supply in the natural form. I think that's a common misconception. And I get asked that a lot, Jamie. Does progesterone affect milk supply? Now, I'm not going to say for for some individuals, is it possible? Certainly everybody has somebody that breaks what is reasonable, or the common. But natural progesterone does not affect milk supply. We gave, it to so many postpartum women. We did not see that.
Right. Yeah, it's so important. And I hear that a lot too. There's kind of this fear around progesterone. And I remember my own sister, I recommended progesterone right after she had her second baby, and the doctor's like, "No, you don't need progesterone. It'll limit your milk supply." And I thought, "Man, even when women are asking for progesterone, if we're not working with doctors who have a clue about progesterone, we're going to be easily talked out of it." So anyway, that's important to note, and I'm glad you said that. Something else that I was surprised by, Teresa, was also the amount of women who, after they have their baby, of course, we know there's this adrenal strain, which is very common after birth, but that, how it affects our thyroid. It's very common, and just even doing research and looking up studies, and that was something I can be honest, I wasn't quite sure on. I didn't know, but this is more common than I think the world lets on, or at least that I've seen and heard. So again, like if there's a thyroid issue, it's going to look like depression, and it's going to look like I'm tired, and it's going to look like I'm irritable. And a lot of thyroid can be impacted by adrenal. Our body, our first and foremost thing, again, is to survive, like we talked about, even at the expense of our thyroid, even at the expense, as we're cycling women, even like to our ovarian function. So, if we've gone through a lot of stress, maybe you had a traumatic delivery, maybe your baby was in NICU, whatever the case may be, and you're still not feeling right, and you're feeling, again, the effects of postpartum depression, get that progesterone, but also get your thyroid levels checked. Because again, this could be something that's hidden that when addressed, you might feel, a world of difference.
Jamie, I want to talk about thyroid a little bit more because, I think it's underknown that the thyroid, your ability and what happens during pregnancy is you increase the amount of thyroid hormone. Postpartum, again, there's a recalibration, but what often happens is that you can actually overproduce thyroid hormone even postpartum. And it can happen to a degree that becomes so severe, they call it postpartum thyroiditis. And of course, as we know from our Hashimoto's episodes, what's the most common reason for hypothyroidism or thyroid problems is autoimmunity. Right. So again, imagine that your thyroid is really stable during pregnancy, or sometimes autoimmune conditions are stable during pregnancy because the immune system is like protecting the child. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, it's not doing that anymore. So what can happen is you unleash kind of that immune system again, and the immune system can start to attack the thyroid. Mm-hmm. So for example, some of the postpartum depression symptoms we just talked about, highly anxious, can't sleep at night sweats, hot flashes, feeling wired, those actually can be postpartum thyroiditis. So and this happens to about 10 to 15% of patients. Now, let's just say it's mild enough and you kind of work yourself through it. Within months, it usually stabilizes itself. So it doesn't need treatment necessarily for every person. However, I would say that getting your thyroid levels checked, if you're feeling those symptoms, about 6 to 8 weeks postpartum is a really good idea. And there are ways that we can support the thyroid. And also, just like in Hashimoto's, sometimes you'll go through this like hyperthyroidism, like high thyroid symptoms that convert eventually into low thyroid symptoms. Mm-hmm. So you can feel all that anxiety, and all of a sudden, like that's going to shift. And then you're tired, dry skin, constipation, hair loss, feeling super foggy in the brain, feeling mood just like low. Those are low thyroid symptoms. And so you can start with high thyroid symptoms and move to low. And that is because of this condition, postpartum thyroiditis. So Jamie, it's just super important. And this is, we'll eventually kind of go into, things that we can do to support everything, but nutrient support, adrenal support, gut support are all going to be super important for the thyroid postpartum.
Totally. Let's talk about nutrient depletion. So because of kind of this transition leeway. So, okay, nutrient depletion. We know that when we've had a baby, it takes a lot of energy. In pregnancy, it takes a lot more calories and it takes more energy to grow a developing baby. We birth that baby and now we're nursing that baby, potentially. And we're depleting more nutrients, and that's okay. But that just means we need more. Especially if we're breastfeeding, we really, really, really need to be paying attention to that. And also after you give birth, you bleed. So making sure that after you have your baby and talk to your doctors about starting supplements, but taking iron, especially if you already had a little low iron anyway, low ferritin, get some good iron in you, get some good red meat, get some good, iron, natural sources, supplement sources. B vitamins. B vitamins give energy. Again, so many of us have depleted B vitamins, and you can again do a nutrient panel and check your B vitamins and vitamin D, for heaven's sake. So sometimes I get, I don't know, a little righteously angry. I think even just thinking about my own past, Teresa, and my own struggles, thinking like, what of this stuff was just nutrient depletion? Like,
Right.
what did I just need? What was my body starving for? And then, of course, magnesium anytime, and zinc anytime we get stressed. I always think about like a cup of water, but I imagine magnesium in it. And every time I get stressed, I imagine that glass of water is tipping, like, and then being poured into the dirt, and the dirt just soaking it up, as in we pour it out every time we're stressed. So magnesium, the same thing for zinc. So, and same thing for many nutrients. So think about if you're already taking a prenatal vitamin, great, continue taking it. But also just check your nutrient status, because again, that's huge in terms of just your well-being. How, for me, I kind of just felt like not myself, and it gets really scary again if you're not sleeping well. And there's so many sources and reasons for not sleeping well. Like, as a matter of fact, Teresa and I were talking about me. I have been sleeping like garbage. And for me, I'm not postpartum, but it kind of triggered these fears from when I was postpartum and not sleeping well. And, it's due to a virus that caused inflammation. And then also this understanding of, my spine and my upper two bones of my cervix. So if you're struggling with sleep, it could be there's an inflammatory event. Go also to the chiropractor and just check. I'm saying that only because I'm like in the midst of trying to like get myself adjusted. I just wish more people did that. Like, is everything working well? So that's my own little caveat that I'll add to that, Teresa. And I do want to talk about copper and zinc balance as well, but do you have anything else to add to nutrients?
Well, I'm going to bring this up just because it's kind of like a thing. And if people are probably going to wonder if we don't bring it up, but placenta encapsulation. Now, I really am not a person who, I don't recommend it. I know it's out there. I've had patients do it. Frankly, I did some research on the Weston Price Foundation and postpartum. Of course, they recommend the fat soluble vitamins and more of an ancestral diet and organ meats and bone broth and raw milk and eggs. And I totally agree with all that. The placenta encapsulation thing, I think, is complicated. And so I'm just going to say, we don't I don't think I would have an opinion on it necessarily, but the point of that is that it's an organ. And when you're saying magnesium, B vitamins, iron, the fat soluble vitamins, we know organ meat is the most nutrient dense food you can possibly eat. When I read the article and somebody had said that they took their placenta and cut it into pieces and then froze it and then put it in smoothies, I just couldn't handle that. I mean, and I know most people dry it out. That's probably a little more tolerable, but I'm just saying, the only thing that I can't get my brain wrapped around is we live in such a toxic society, and your placenta is meant to like make sure those toxins don't go to your baby in a sense. And I don't know. I just don't know if I totally agree with that. But before I let you go into the copper and zinc, because this is going to lead into that, I just want to mention our podcast sponsor, because they would have so much great nutrient support for postpartum moms. So We Heart Nutrition, they have a wholesome iron. They have postnatal supplements. They have prenatal supplements. They have immunity supplements. They have, I don't know if they have, I think they have a probiotic. Yes, I've taken it.
Yeah. That's new.
There is just so many things that I think We Heart Nutrition could offer the postpartum mom, that we want you to look at We Heart Nutrition, and we want you to be able to get the 20% off code. It's Genius, 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 to off your first order, 20% off We Heart Nutrition. Please check them out, because literally they have everything that you would need, because you're going to need extra nutritional support. We just can't always get it from our diets now. And so we just need that. The other thing I want to mention, because, and this will move us into gut health as well, and the microbiome and how your microbiome is how your baby's microbiome is set up. This is so important, Jamie.
It's
This
so
is
awesome.
like, yeah,
Hmm.
like your microbiome, literally, like when you start producing milk, like if you don't have a healthy microbiome, your baby, in a sense, isn't going to get the right start in their microbiome because they're relying on your microbiome to start their microbiome.
Hmm.
So one of the new kind of exciting supplements that we are partnering with is Wonder Cow colostrum. I am so excited about this because they are also, just like We Heart Nutrition, a family owned business, truly believes in nurturing family. And they have, young children that they have helped to bring to wellness through their colostrum. Colostrum contains all of these nutrients, again, all the vitamins that we were talking about, but also IgG, immune system globulins that help, again, our gut health restore. And this is what basically goes into our breast milk. So if you want to help your microbiome, please check out Wonder Cow. We have a link that allows you to get Wonder Cow at a discount. And we're just so excited to partner with them as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited because Teresa, per your recommendation, I started taking colostrum. And again, I just put it in water, I mix it up, I drink it, and it's good. I mean, it tastes like milk, just like a very potent milk, but it's good, and I feel like it's really helping me, especially because I needed antibiotics. So if any of you guys have been sick lately, colostrum is another really great way, again, to repair that gut post antibiotic, and that's what I've really been focusing on. So I'm really excited for that. Okay, and then, of course, as Teresa mentioned, speaking about the gut microbiome, we have partnered with Tiny Health. I want you to know that everyone we partner with has been very intentional. We could partner with a million people, but we don't. We partner with the people, with the companies that again have the value of empowering women and families. And so what I love so much about Tiny Health is that again, it's Tiny Health gut testing, not just for you, but even for your baby. Right out of the chute, literally. And so you can actually sign up to be a member at Tiny Health where the are even cheaper. But for $50 off your first test, you can type in Hormone Genius at checkout at tinyhealth.com and get a good sense of your gut microbiome, which has so much to do with mood, skin, immune system, digestion, all of that. And then also get a good sense of your newborn babies and your kids at any age. So we really love Tiny Health. Okay, so going back, Teresa, to the nutrients and thinking even about like the placental encapsulation. I don't know if you know this, but with my first baby, Emma, I did encapsulate my placenta. Well, I didn't. I had someone do it for me. And I thought, I'm going to do this and it's going to be awesome. And some of you may have positive experiences with ingesting your own placenta. I, on the other hand, had a terrible experience. It was terrible. And coming to learn more of what I've come to realize about copper, I think I know why. So we had a gal named Amanda Daly on our podcast a few years ago, and she has the business and the coaching company called the Philomena Project. And her whole goal is perinatal depression awareness and postpartum depression awareness because of her own story. For her, she had a number of disorders and really struggled with copper balance, and so much so that she became copper toxic. She understood this by working with a number of doctors, by getting her hair tested, blood samples, gut, all of what you can do to understand a whole picture of health. So I did the same. This was last year, and guess what? I have elevated levels of copper, and it's probably has a lot to do with genetics, liver, a bunch of things. So, main point is I believe I probably was high copper after I had Emma. And when you encapsulate your placenta, you are getting a crap ton of copper. Your body needs to, as your body is experiencing that plummet of the progesterone estrogen, and we feel it, we really should also be coming down normally from nutrients like copper. And that's normal and that's good. Some of us don't. And so if we don't, and then we're ingesting it through placental and even organ meats postpartum, that actually can skyrocket postpartum depression. So while it's nutrient dense and great, it's important to know what are your copper levels at now. Organ meat and placental encapsulation can actually make it worse. But the way to help yourself with copper, okay, and I don't want people to get way weird about this, but it is kind of like a stone you need to turn over if you or a friend are struggling with postpartum depression. I'm going to simplify this, and it's not always the case for everyone, but really think about increasing your zinc. There, again, there's a ratio. People in the mineral world hate it when people talk about ratios, but there's a relationship, I'll say, between copper and zinc. Okay. And often copper is elevated when zinc is just low. So it's kind of, in a sense, I think, Teresa, about estrogen dominance. Well, we can be estrogen dominant because progesterone is just low.
Mhm.
Maybe estrogen levels are fine after ovulation, but our progesterone levels are low, so it makes us estrogen dominant. That's what can happen with copper and zinc. So what we can do is making sure we're increasing zinc, but also what also helps with the copper balance is increasing magnesium and vitamin B6. So zinc, magnesium, vitamin B6 helps to kind of restore balance to the copper issue. Again, that's kind of like a 2.0. But if you're struggling and suffering, and again, if you think about being hyper and you think about copper as a metal and wire and electricity, and if there's so much copper, you can imagine why you'd be like always on, kind of wired constantly. And so copper is something that needs to be tended to carefully for sure, but it's definitely worth the mention. And if you want to learn more, check out philomenaproject.com, Amanda Daly, because her whole thing is about perinatal depression, so depression while pregnant and postpartum, and she can really help you with some resources.
That's great, Jamie. And I have lately been doing that with my postpartum ladies, and I have them take zinc glycinate,
Yeah.
just like magnesium glycinate. Like, and the reason why I'm thinking about this too, Jamie, glycine also is such a calming, like amino acid, right? And we need that
Mhm.
postpartum. So the more glycine we get, even better. So
Mm.
zinc glycinate, magnesium glycinate, just like that's like in your postpartum kit. Like,
Yeah,
what's your postpartum kits, supplements? Well, zinc is probably that might be optional for some, but like magnesium glycinate for sure. The other one that I
definitely.
think is a no-brainer is omega-3 fatty acids because they're anti-inflammatory, but because the DHA literally supports your
Yeah.
baby's brain. And I brought this up in the omega-3 podcast we did, but there is research going on literally that shows if you are not in a good range of DHA and omega-3, your baby's IQ is going to be less. Like omega-3 deficiency is associated with lower IQ, guys. So please, it doesn't have to be fish oil. It can even be algae oil, which is another form of omega-3 fatty acids. But
Mhm.
please add that because I think everybody would like to help their kid's brain out, right now,
Oh,
especially with so many like issues like autism and neurodivergence and stuff like that. Like we just want brain support.
yes.
Magnesium, omega-3s, I think are amazing. And then again, all of the prenatal, postnatal supplements are still really important too.
Yes. So
Um,
important.
yeah. So what else, Jamie, do we
Yeah.
need to talk about in relationship to postpartum?
So let's talk about kind of recapping in a way some, evidence-based support for the woman postpartum, like kind of a recap, but like again, like you said, like a toolkit or an action plan. So we're going to divide this up into 6 things. If you have a pen and paper, you can write it down, or actually in the show notes, we will include this PDF for you to have access to and print off. So in the category of nutrition, again, you're a postpartum woman, or let's say you're the husband just happening to be listening to this, or send this to a husband of a woman who just had a baby because she might be overwhelmed and tired. So if you are a friend of a couple who just had a baby, send this episode to the husband. Because again, the husband's kind of like, the protector, the person to kind of make sure she's doing okay. Because yeah, we all know that after a baby, it can be a little hard and tiresome, especially if we struggle. Okay, so category 1 is nutrition. So make sure you eat protein, make sure your wife eats protein, make sure your friend or sister eats protein every meal. Every single meal includes zinc and magnesium rich foods like pumpkin seeds, eggs, beef, fibers, greens. Replenish omega 3s, eating salmon, chia, flax, adding them to your smoothie, B vitamins, or just get a solid multivitamin. Multivitamins and supplements don't take the place of healthy eating, just as an FYI. So it's not one or the other, it can be both. Okay, number 2 is rest and recovery. Prioritize sleeping. We hear that constantly all the time. But even 90 minutes of a cat nap, or 20 minutes even, but 20 to 90 minutes, be so happy with that. I remember after I had Emma and they were doing the postpartum screening with me, she asked, do you get 6 hours of sleep a day at least. And I'm like, heck no, no way. I do not get that. She's like, it doesn't have to be all in one shot. It just means throughout the day, can you get 6 hours? So that helped me calm me down a bit because it made me think, okay, even if I had a rough night with baby and I got 3 hours, I can make up the difference of the six with two 90-minute naps. So again, it is essential, again, that you sleep when the baby sleeps. If you can't, if it makes you uncomfortable, find a mother's helper or your mother or a neighbor that just can be with the baby so you can sleep. For me, it was hard, Teresa. I don't know if it was hard for you, but it's like if I'm like, oh, I'll sleep when the baby's sleeping, but I'm still the caretaker of that baby right away. I can't settle down. I need someone just to be in charge. Right. So it helps me nap. And accept help. Like I said, that's key. 3, emotional support. So we have nutrition, rest and recovery, and emotional support. Make sure that you connect with other women or people who've just recently gone postpartum because they can support you. Often there are, breastfeeding support groups that serve as the emotional support. Breastfeeding support groups are incredible, and I can't speak enough about them. So be sure you get connected, even if you're bottle feeding your baby or you're pumping or you're just not, you feel maybe, oh, I'm not breastfeeding. That's okay. Find some new mom support group. It's essential. So that's 3, cycle awareness. Be sure that you're working with a fertility awareness instructor because, again, the first 56 days postpartum, according to Dr. Hilgers, if you're exclusively breastfeeding, you're considered infertile. But it is important that you're kind of understanding your fertile signs, and working with a fertility awareness instructor or a hormone coach would be a great move for you. If you're having, so this is number 5, if you're having intrusive thoughts, again, this is for the husbands and the friends, because some of the women, they don't see it in themselves or they can kind of, justify themselves out of it. But if there is anxiety, intrusive thoughts, again, you're not sleeping, and these mood changes and struggles persist for 2+ weeks, seek help. Seek help. Go to a mental health therapist. Go get prayer. Find help. It's okay. This isn't new, but people hide because they're scared. But please don't be scared. And again, husbands and friends, sometimes it takes you to actually get them the help they need. And then lastly, progesterone support, which we talked a lot about. Again, bioidentical progesterone is key. Teresa talked a bunch about it. So again, those are the kind of the 6 pillars of health postpartum to be really focusing in on. And again, we need a community and we need a village to actually be doing that for ourselves because it's hard to ask for help.
So true, Jamie. And when you think about it, postpartum, a lot of times, like we kind of like go into our homes and then we just don't come out.
Yeah.
Like, this idea of like the newborn, it's so fragile and little. We like don't go out to the store. We're trying to keep our babies healthy. And so people may not be recognizing that the woman is not doing well. And I could see a lot of husbands being fearful of like, is this normal? Like, what do I do? So just, again, an encouragement, like maybe an encouragement to other women, check on your postpartum friends. Yeah. And maybe ask the question, like, are you doing okay emotionally? Kind of open up the can of worms in a sense. And if you get the feeling that maybe this person isn't doing well, like really offer support, encouragement that they should go speak to their healthcare professional, therapist, whoever. So it just made me really think like, gosh, we kind of like isolate ourselves postpartum and we may really be needing support and it's just not there for us at that time. And it made me also think of Kitty. So sorry, I'm Kitty Eisenbill, and we didn't like talk so much about postpartum or breastfeeding hormones, but again, oxytocin and prolactin, there's this direct relationship with dopamine too. And Kitty Eisenbill in one of our previous episodes talked about like this emotional feeling of like depression and loss when she breastfed. Yeah. That was very quick. And that has to do with the dopamine change. So again, it just shows you there are so many things going on in the brain. There's so many things that are going on in the gut and in the entire body with postpartum. The other thing, Jamie, I want to just touch on is that women are low estrogen when they are postpartum, very low estrogen. And that is because prolactin needs to, again, be more dominant to be able to produce milk. But low estrogen kind of makes you feel like a menopausal woman. So you could literally be in your 20s or 30s and feel like a postpartum or a menopausal woman. And so if you're like having tons of vaginal dryness or tons of like night sweats and hot flashes or brain fog, there are certain situations where some amount of like vaginal estrogen support can be used and it can be very helpful, especially if like outside of that initial 6 weeks, maybe you're having a lot of discomfort with intercourse and you're like, what is going on? I just feel like I'm so like dry and fragile down there. So that's another hormone, Jamie, is like low estrogen may need some support. And I know from a holistic standpoint, there's some herbs and even some adaptogens that can be used safely in pregnancy or postpartum, excuse me, but like holy basil, Vitex, not so much, but maybe red raspberry. And I'm not an expert in postpartum herbs and things like that, but maybe there's some more holistic things that could be used. And you could consult again your hormone coach or your naturopathic doctor on just some helpful tips that could be, really supportive to postpartum.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick, going back to the breastfeeding thing that you were sharing with Kitty Eisenbell, DMER, dysphoric milk ejection reflex. So yeah, it's like a temporary reflex-driven condition where breastfeeding individuals experience sudden negative emotions or physical sensations like a pit in the stomach, which I can say I've felt that before when breastfeeding. So again, it can really mess with the woman's head, but there's a name for it. Yeah. And you don't need to be ashamed. And there's even a website you can go to. Because again, there's postpartum psychosis as well. That's a whole other episode. And we talked about that with, again, Amanda Daly. But there is a name. It's not just you. There is a name. And so don't feel like you're alone here. And there are supplements that you can use with guidance. If you're still wishing to continue breastfeeding, there are some tools. 2 tips I want to give women before we get off here. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 coaching tips. Okay, so if you were a hormone coach and I was teaching you something, this is what I would say, and you're working with a postpartum woman. I would say, number 1, it is essential that you ask her birth story. It's essential. Women need to process. So the way we hormone coach a woman postpartum is different than the woman who's cycling. So in the postpartum phase, the first thing you do as a friend, you can be a coach and a friend to your postpartum friend and saying, tell me everything. Tell me everything and don't leave anything out. Tell me everything. That is so important. And for me, even as I've worked with postpartum women, I don't just stop there. I say, okay, now I want you to write it. If you feel comfortable and you feel motivated, write it out. Like thinking about saying it, writing it, and then they get to hear me say it to them. There's something about processing it, and even better if they're on a walk when they do this, like when they're sharing with me, because of bilateral movement and processing trauma. And what happens is sometimes that trauma gets stuck in one part of the brain, but when you can process it and bring it to the right and to the left, it's like what EMDR is. That's really important, and they can do that. They can do that themselves, or go on a walk with a friend. Maybe they don't say it to you, but again, you're the friend. Say, let's go on a walk and tell me all about it.
Or record it in your phone.
Record it on your phone and go on a walk. Great. That's such a good idea. Secondly, if you're with a friend who just had a baby and you want to know how they're doing, slowly and gently, just look at them and say, how are you really? And if they respond too quick, this is what's going to happen. They're either going to respond too quick, which means there's something going on, or they'll start to cry.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, one of those 2 things will happen. If they start to talk too quick, you can slow them down. You know your friend best. Just be like, no. Like, I really want you to tell me. And you don't have to talk a lot. You just, the key is that you're so quiet and you don't break eye contact. It's like the eye contact is key. You guys have all been there, right? Where you go to the doctor or the dentist or your hair person and they look you straight in the eye. You're suffering and they say, no, but how are you? The eye in that, it's like you can't hold back. Like it's just going to come. And that is so healing and good for that woman. So healing and good. So I just gave you 2 tips to help your postpartum friend. We're going to include a PDF in the show notes. Are there any last thoughts, Teresa, before we say goodbye to our listeners today?
No, that was so good, Jamie. Thanks. I really appreciated those last 2 tips. I think you were so right. And that is what I do when I meet my postpartum mom. I just say, so how did it go? Like, tell me about how your birth went. Even if I had nothing to do with it, because I don't deliver babies, right. I still know that they need an appropriate place to be able to share that. And so I always offer that opportunity. So I really appreciate that tip, Jamie. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is a great episode. I hope this really helps a lot of postpartum moms. Please share it with a friend. Please, share our podcast with a friend. There's so much great information. Write a review. help us to continue to support you guys by doing the Hormone Genius podcast for years to come. We really appreciate it, and we will see you at the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.